This is my true story. I was a father who gave everything to his family. I worked every day, saved every dollar, and made sure they never went hungry or cold. I thought when I grew old, they'd care for me the same way I cared for them. But I was wrong. On Christmas Eve, the people I called my own drove me to a shelter and left me there like trash. I thought my life was over that night, until one small thing in my pocket changed everything. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is, and please subscribe so more people hear my story. It was cold that night, the kind of cold that burns when you breathe. My son said they were taking me somewhere safe. I believed him. I thought maybe they had planned a small surprise, maybe dinner, maybe church service. But the car didn't stop near town or anywhere familiar. It stopped in front of a brick building with flickering lights and a sign that said, "Community Shelter." He didn't look at me when I asked what we were doing there. He just pointed at the door. I sat there confused, holding my small bag, waiting for him to say something that made sense. But nothing came. He just said they couldn't manage me anymore. Then he opened the trunk, pulled out my old coat, and tossed it in my lap. The air felt heavy. I stepped out of the car slowly, thinking maybe this was temporary. But before I could even turn around, the car door slammed and the headlights faded into the dark. I stood there alone, my breath fogging in front of me, the cold wind cutting through my thin jacket. A man at the door of the shelter looked at me, nodded, and handed me a clipboard to sign in. No words, just routine. I wrote my name with shaking hands, trying not to cry in front of strangers. I had never imagined that after decades of working, after paying bills, mortgages, and hospital fees, my last stop in life would be here, dumped like an unwanted package. Inside, the air smelled like soup and cleaning chemicals. People were lying on cots, wrapped in thin blankets. Some were talking quietly, others were already asleep. I found an empty cot near the wall and sat down. My hands were stiff from the cold, and I could still feel the vibration of the car engine that brought me there. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, that maybe they'd come back in the morning. But deep down, I knew they wouldn't. Families don't drop you off on Christmas Eve by mistake. As I lay there that night, I thought about all the years I spent raising them. The early mornings, the double shifts, the Christmas mornings when I stayed up wrapping gifts so they'd wake up smiling. I had given everything I had, time, money, love, without asking for anything in return. And this was how they thanked me. They said there was no room in the house I built with my own hands, the house I paid for, the house where I once carried them to bed when they were too tired to walk. Outside, I could hear carolers singing in the distance. The sound was soft, almost mocking. I remembered when we used to sing like that together. My wife, before she passed, loved Christmas more than anything. She would have been ashamed to see what her children had become. I turned over on the cot and tried to sleep, but the cold metal frame pressed against my back. I stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks, trying to keep my heart from breaking completely. One of the volunteers walked by and handed me a small cup of coffee. It was lukewarm, but it felt like the kindest thing anyone had done for me all week. I nodded in thanks. I didn't speak. Words felt too small for the kind of hurt I carried. Around me, people snored, coughed, whispered in their sleep. Some prayed quietly. I didn't pray. Not that night. I just closed my eyes and promised myself one thing: that if I ever got out of that shelter, I would never depend on anyone again. Not a son, not a relative, no one. I would find a way to stand again, even if it took every last bit of strength left in me. I didn't know how, but I knew one thing for sure. Life wasn't done with me yet. The first thing I felt that morning wasn't cold. It was shame, the kind that sits heavy in your chest and doesn't move. When I opened my eyes, the shelter lights were still dim and breakfast was being served. Paper plates, watery oatmeal, burnt coffee. People lined up quietly, heads down. I joined the line, trying to blend in, but I could feel eyes on me. Some were curious, others just tired. It didn't matter. I didn't belong there, and they could tell. I used to walk into restaurants where people greeted me with respect. Now I stood in a charity line, waiting for a meal like a beggar. I sat down with my tray and stared at the food. My hands trembled. I wasn't hungry, but I forced myself to eat. Pride doesn't fill an empty stomach. Across the room, an old man was talking to himself, mumbling about how his children forgot him too. A woman wiped her eyes quietly while reading a worn-out photo in her hand. I realized I wasn't the only one who'd been thrown away by family. The world outside pretends to care about kindness, but here, in this room, you see the truth. People only love you when you're useful. My coat was thin, the same one I wore for years. The zipper was broken, the pockets torn. I could still smell the faint scent of my house on it. The wood polish, the detergent, the warmth of a place that wasn't mine anymore. I rubbed my hands together to stay warm, but it didn't help. I wanted to go outside, but I didn't know where to go. The shelter had a rule. You could leave, but you couldn't come back after dark unless you signed up again. I had nowhere else to be, so I stayed. When I looked out the window, snow was falling. I could picture my family inside my house, my son sitting near the fireplace, his wife smiling, the tree lit up in the corner. They were probably opening gifts, eating dinner, pretending I never existed. Maybe they were telling people I was staying somewhere comfortable. People like them always lie to make themselves look clean. They didn't say they dumped me here because I was too slow or too much work. They didn't say they left me on Christmas Eve with nothing but a small bag and old shoes. Later that day, a group of volunteers came in, handing out donated coats and socks. One of them smiled at me and asked if I needed anything. I wanted to say, a home, but I just nodded and took what she gave me. The coat was 2 sizes too big, but it was warm. That small act of kindness felt bigger than anything my own family had done in years. I realized strangers had more humanity than the people I raised. I went back to my cot after dinner. The noise in the room grew louder, people laughing, some playing cards, others just talking about life. I didn't join them. I couldn't. I lay there, staring at the ceiling again, listening to the echoes of other people's pain. My life had fallen apart in less than 24 hours. One day I was sitting at home, planning what gifts to buy for my grandkids, and the next I was here, invisible. That's how fast love can disappear when it's built on convenience. Before I tried to sleep, I reached into my pocket and felt the crumpled lottery ticket I'd bought earlier that week. I had forgotten all about it. It was a quick pick, a habit I kept for years, not because I believed in luck, but because it gave me a small moment of hope. I held it in my hand that night, staring at the numbers. It was just a piece of paper then, something worthless. But it was mine. The only thing I still owned that hadn't been taken from me. I slipped it back into my pocket, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself that maybe, just maybe, something would change. That night the pain started in my chest. It wasn't sharp, just heavy, like something pressing down, refusing to move. I couldn't tell if it was my heart or the weight of what they did to me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, my son, his wife, my grandkids, all smiling as they drove away. I tried to tell myself maybe they'd come back, maybe they'd realize what they did. But morning came, and no one showed. Just another cold sunrise through dirty shelter windows. I sat up slowly, clutching my coat tighter around me. My hands were swollen from the cold. The coffee they served was thin and bitter, but I drank it anyway. I kept thinking about Christmas mornings from years ago. The smell of pancakes, the sound of wrapping paper, the laughter that used to fill my house. My house. Now they had it. Decorated, warm, full of lights. They probably sat around the same table where I once carved the turkey. I built that home with my bare hands, and now it was filled with people who couldn't even give me a bed for one night. The other men in the shelter started talking about their families. One said his daughter stopped calling after she got married. Another said his sons only visit when they want money. I realized I wasn't alone in this kind of pain. There's a special kind of heartbreak that comes from your own blood turning cold. It doesn't kill you fast. It just drains you, piece by piece. I didn't talk much. I just listened. Everyone had their story, but the ending was always the same. Forgotten parents, broken promises, empty homes. When the snow stopped falling, I went outside to breathe. The sky was gray, the ground wet, but it felt better than being indoors. I walked a few blocks, slowly, because my knees were stiff. The streets were quiet, stores were closed, everyone was home, celebrating. I passed a bakery where I used to buy cakes for my kids. I stood outside, staring at the display, remembering the times I'd surprise them with treats after work. I could almost hear their little voices, their laughter. That memory should have warmed me. Instead, it hurt more than anything. I sat down on a bench outside a closed shop. My chest felt tighter. I pressed my hand against it and took deep breaths. I wasn't scared of dying. I was scared of dying forgotten. The thought that no one would care if I was gone, that was harder to bear than the cold. For the first time, I wondered what all those years of hard work were for. You raise children thinking they'll carry your love forward. But sometimes, they only carry your money. When the shelter volunteer came by in a van offering rides, I climbed in. She asked if I was okay. I nodded. There was no point explaining. People feel sorry for old men in shelters, but they don't understand what betrayal feels like. It's not about being poor. It's about being erased by the people you built your life around. Back inside, I lay on my cot and looked at the ceiling again. I felt that small piece of paper in my pocket, the lottery ticket. I took it out, unfolded it, and stared at the numbers. It almost made me laugh. The irony of it. A broke old man holding a piece of paper that promised something better, something impossible. I didn't believe in luck anymore, but I still kept it close. Maybe not for hope, but for memory. It reminded me that even the smallest things can change when you least expect it. I closed my eyes that night thinking about one thing. I might have lost everything, but I wasn't dead yet. Tomorrow could still surprise me. That small piece of paper in my pocket became the only thing I had left that belonged to me. I'd bought it 2 days before Christmas when I was still at home. My son had sent me to the corner store to pick up groceries. I had a few dollars left after paying for what he asked, and without thinking, I bought one lottery ticket. Just one. It wasn't a plan or a dream. It was habit. Every week for years, I'd buy one ticket, scratch it, and throw it away. Never won more than a few dollars. But this time, for some reason, I didn't toss it out. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my coat pocket. I forgot about it completely until that night in the shelter. When I reached into my pocket and felt the thin paper, it felt like a piece of my old life. Something small. Something mine. I pulled it out, looked at the numbers, and smiled bitterly. The ink was slightly smudged from my wet gloves. I almost threw it away right then, but something stopped me. Maybe pride, maybe stubbornness. Maybe it was just that I had nothing else left to lose. I slid it back into my pocket and told myself I'd check it in the morning. The other men around me were talking about getting back on their feet after the holidays. Some were waiting for jobs to reopen, others hoping for family to call. I didn't join in. I'd already accepted that my family wouldn't be calling, not tomorrow, not ever. But that little ticket burned in my hand all night. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it represented. A chance, however small, that my story wasn't finished yet. When the shelter lights went out, I lay awake staring into the dark. The sound of wind outside mixed with the quiet snoring of the men around me. I thought about the life I used to have. The noise, the laughter, the arguments, the smell of dinner cooking. Now, all I had was silence and one piece of paper that probably meant nothing. But still, I couldn't throw it away. I held it in my palm like it was something alive. Early the next morning, before anyone else was up, I sat by the old television in the dining hall. It was a small screen, flickering with static, tuned to the morning news. The air smelled like burnt coffee and bleach. I didn't expect anything. I just wanted to distract myself. I unfolded the ticket again and looked at the numbers. 4, 12, 19, 27, 33, and 48. I whispered them in my head a few times, like a prayer I didn't believe in. Then I waited for the announcer to read the winning numbers. As I sat there, I thought about the irony of it all. Me sitting in a shelter, holding a worthless ticket, while my family sat in my warm house. They probably didn't even remember I existed. I rubbed my hands together to warm them and stared at the screen. The news anchors were smiling, cheerful, talking about holiday winners and miracles. It all sounded fake, like a joke that wasn't funny. But when the lottery segment came on, my heart skipped a beat. They started reading the numbers, one by one: 4, 12, 19, 27, 33, 48. I blinked. I looked at my ticket again. Every number matched, every single one. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I looked again, carefully, shaking so hard the paper nearly tore. Still matched. I stood there frozen, staring at the screen. The ticket I almost threw away. The ticket I bought with my last few dollars. The one I forgot in my coat pocket. It was worth $5 million, but I didn't jump. I didn't scream. I just sat back down slowly and laughed under my breath. Not out of joy, out of disbelief, out of the simple, quiet realization that fate has a strange way of paying people back. When I woke up that Christmas morning, I didn't expect anything different. The same smell of coffee, the same noise of footsteps, the same tired faces waiting for breakfast. But the small TV in the shelter dining hall was already on, showing the morning news. I sat down at one of the plastic tables, holding my crumpled lottery ticket. My hands were shaking from the cold. I unfolded the paper slowly, trying to smooth out the wrinkles. I didn't think it was worth much. Probably another lost ticket like all the rest. Still, I looked at it one more time before tossing it. The screen flashed bright colors and cheerful voices. The news anchors were smiling, talking about Christmas miracles and good fortune. Then the lottery segment came up. I almost looked away, but when they started reading the winning numbers, something in me froze. One by one, each number matched mine. 4, 12, 19, 27, 33, 48. My heart started pounding so loud I could barely hear the rest. I checked again, then again. Every single number matched. I blinked hard, thinking it was some kind of mistake. I rubbed my eyes, leaned closer to the screen, and held the ticket inches from my face. But it was real. The announcer said it again. The jackpot was $5 million. The shelter went quiet when I stood up suddenly, clutching the ticket in both hands. A few people turned to look. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe. I just stared at the TV while the world blurred around me. A volunteer came over and asked if I was okay. I nodded, but tears started falling before I even realized. Not from sadness, from disbelief. I had nothing. Not a family, not a home, not even a proper pair of shoes. And now, suddenly, I had $5 million in my coat pocket. It didn't feel real. It felt like some kind of strange punishment or reward. I couldn't tell which. The shelter staff helped me call the lottery office. I verified the numbers step by step, still expecting someone to say there had been a mistake. But every check came back clear. I was the only winner. They told me to come down to the local station for verification. The staff at the shelter started cheering. Some clapped. One man patted my shoulder and said I was the Christmas miracle that year. I didn't know what to say. When I left the shelter that morning, cameras were already outside. Reporters had shown up fast. Word spread quickly when a man who was dropped off at a homeless shelter on Christmas Eve became a millionaire the next morning. They wanted pictures, stories, reactions. I didn't have fancy clothes or clean shoes. I still wore the same coat my family had left me in. But I walked into that lottery office standing tall. I didn't need a suit. The truth was enough. When the reporter asked how I felt, I didn't talk about luck. I talked about being left behind. I told them that I was dropped off at a shelter less than 12 hours before finding out I was the winner. The room went silent for a moment. They recorded everything: my face, my name, my story. And by the time I left that building, the world knew exactly who I was. I didn't smile much that day. People expected me to be excited, to jump and celebrate. But I wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about the car door that slammed in my face the night before. The faces that left me in the cold, the laughter that faded into darkness. They thought they'd gotten rid of me. But fate had other plans. The cameras followed me as I walked out of that building. Reporters shouted questions, flashes went off, and people clapped. They called me the Christmas miracle. Some even cried when they heard my story. I didn't cry. I just stood there, holding the giant check they gave me, still wearing my torn coat and broken shoes. The coat that smelled like a shelter bed. The shoes that had holes in the soles. I didn't want to change out of them. I wanted the world to see exactly what my family threw away. They asked me if I had anyone to call. I told them no. They asked if I had any message for my family. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The cameras had already said enough. My face was on every TV screen in the state by noon. My name was trending online. The man who was left in the cold was now holding $5 million. Every shot, every word, every story that aired made the truth louder. I wasn't the broken one. They were. The staff at the shelter hugged me before I left. Some were crying. The same people who had nothing were genuinely happy for me. That hit me harder than the money. Strangers showed more love in a few hours than my family had shown me in years. I took pictures with them before leaving. I promised I'd come back. And I meant it. When I walked out to the parking lot, the reporters kept asking what I'd do first. A man offered to buy me new clothes. Another offered to drive me to a hotel. I said no to both. I didn't want comfort yet. I wanted the world to see the truth, not a cleaned-up version of it. I wanted people to remember what I looked like when my own family left me behind. Because that's the real story. By the time I got to the hotel later that day, my phone, the one the shelter had given me, wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers, news channels, talk shows, people offering financial advice. I turned it off. I sat on the hotel bed and watched the evening news. My picture filled the screen. The anchor said, "A local man abandoned by his family finds his miracle this Christmas." I sat there in silence, staring at the screen. Then I saw it, a live shot of my old neighborhood, my house, my family's house, the same one they threw me out of. The reporter was standing right outside the driveway. Behind her I saw them, my son, his wife, my grandkids, standing in the window, faces pale, eyes wide, watching me on TV. The world knew now. Their neighbors knew. Their co-workers knew. The people they bragged to all year knew. Everyone knew. I imagined what they were thinking: regret, shame, maybe fear. They had thrown me away to make space in their lives, and now the man they left on the curb had become a headline. They probably couldn't leave the house without hearing whispers. I didn't feel angry anymore, just calm. Sometimes life doesn't need your help to set things right. Later that night, when the phone rang again, I let it go to voicemail. I knew who it was. I didn't need to hear their voices to know what they'd say. Apologies, excuses, lies. But I didn't need their words. The world had already spoken for me. That night, for the first time in years, I slept in a real bed. Warm sheets, quiet room, soft light. But even then, I didn't smile. I just stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened in 24 hours, from a cot in a shelter to a hotel room worth more than my old house. I realized then that revenge doesn't always come with fire or shouting. Sometimes it comes wrapped in silence and fate. By the next morning, every local station was running the story. My face was everywhere. Newspapers, television, even the front page of news sites. Elderly man abandoned by family wins $5 million lottery. They repeated it again and again. Every detail was there. My name, my age, the shelter's name, even the small town where my son lived. The camera crews had parked right outside their house. Reporters stood on the sidewalk asking neighbors what they thought. Neighbors didn't hold back. They said it was heartless, cruel, disgusting. Every person on that street now knew the truth about my family. They tried to hide at first. Curtains closed, lights off. But the news trucks didn't leave. People stopped by their front yard, taking pictures, whispering. Someone even left a sign on their fence that said, "Shame." My son's wife called the news station to say it was a misunderstanding. She said they didn't abandon me, that they just couldn't give me proper care. But it was too late. The world had already decided who was right. Every video, every photo told the truth. I was sitting in a shelter while they were celebrating Christmas at home. I sat in my hotel room, watching all of it unfold. I didn't feel proud or vengeful, just quiet. Everything they did in secret was now public. Every person they lied to could now see their faces on the screen, smiling next to the man they dumped in the cold. I didn't have to lift a finger. Karma worked faster than any plan I could have made. The phone rang all day. Producers from national shows wanted interviews. Banks wanted to help manage my money. Even people from my old job reached out to congratulate me. Everyone wanted a piece of the story, but the ones who needed to see it the most were already living the nightmare, my family. I didn't take their calls. I didn't reply to their messages. I let them sit in silence while the world judged them. By noon, photos of them started circulating online. Someone had found old pictures from social media, family vacations, dinners, smiling faces. Underneath, comments poured in. People called them ungrateful, heartless, greedy. Every post they'd made in the past became a reminder of their hypocrisy. Their perfect image was gone in a single day. The same pride that made them abandon me was now burning their reputation to the ground. I knew they'd be glued to the TV that day. I knew they couldn't escape it. Every time they changed the channel, there I was, the old man they threw out. Every time they looked at their phones, there was another article, another headline, another reminder. Their world was built on pretending to be good people, and now everyone knew better. The next morning, my son tried to talk to the reporters outside. He said he deeply regretted what happened, but the cameras didn't care about his regret. They cared about the image of a man trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. When he went to work, his boss sent him home. His company didn't want the attention. My daughter-in-law stopped going out completely. My grandkids stopped posting online. In less than 48 hours, their lives turned upside down. Not because of what I said, but because of what they did. I stayed quiet. I didn't give interviews. I didn't post anything. The silence hurt them more. They couldn't twist my words because I didn't give them any. Every headline spoke for itself. Every viewer could see what kind of people they were. For years they had painted me as the old burden. Now the world saw the truth. They weren't caretakers. They were cowards. That night, I turned off the TV and sat by the hotel window. Outside, snow was falling again, just like the night they left me. But this time, I wasn't cold. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't forgotten. The same snow that covered me outside that shelter now fell outside my window in silence, like the world was quietly erasing every trace of their cruelty. By the third day, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls came from every direction. Reporters, banks, old neighbors, distant relatives, and finally, my family. At first, I ignored every number I didn't know. But then I saw it. My son's number flashing on the screen. I stared at it for a while. The same number that used to call me when he needed money, advice, or a favor. Now he was calling for something else. I let it ring until it stopped. 5 minutes later, it rang again. This time it was his wife, then my granddaughter. Over and over. I didn't answer a single one. They left voicemail after voicemail. Some were quiet, others desperate. They said they made a mistake. They said they were worried. They said they didn't mean to leave me there. Each one sounded more frantic than the last. The words didn't hurt, not anymore. I had already heard the truth when they slammed that car door. I didn't need apologies that came only after the world turned against them. They weren't sorry because they cared. They were sorry because everyone saw what they did. One message made me pause. It was my son's voice, softer than I'd ever heard it. He said the neighbors had stopped talking to them. His boss told him not to come back until things cooled off. His wife's parents were embarrassed. The kids were getting bullied online. He said he couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't step outside without cameras following him. For a brief second, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered how easily he left me in that parking lot on Christmas Eve, standing alone in the snow. The same silence he gave me that night. I gave it back now. The calls kept coming through the evening. They begged me to come home, to fix this together, to tell the truth. But the truth didn't need fixing. The truth was on every screen in America. The old man they left to freeze was now a millionaire, and they were the villains of the story. I didn't make it that way. They did. I just existed long enough for the world to notice. By the fourth day, their tone changed. The begging turned to anger. I heard my son shout in one message that the money was ours, that I was making a fool of the family. He said I was turning people against them. I laughed when I heard that. He still didn't understand. I didn't have to turn anyone against them. They did that to themselves the moment they chose cruelty over compassion. When I walked through the hotel lobby that night, one of the employees stopped me. He had tears in his eyes and said, "You remind me of my father." He hugged me before I could even reply. That one hug from a stranger meant more than anything my own family ever gave me. For years, I had begged for love from people who saw me as an inconvenience. Now, I didn't have to beg. Respect came naturally once the truth came out. I turned my phone off for good after that. I didn't need to hear another word. They had their chance, years of chances, to show kindness. I had given them everything: a home, education, stability, and trust. All they had to do was stand by me when I got old. Instead, they traded me for comfort, and comfort was the first thing the world took from them. While they hid behind closed doors, I sat by the window of my suite, watching snow fall over the city lights. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even smiling. I was simply free. The pain that used to live inside me had finally been replaced by peace. The silence that used to feel heavy now felt like relief. I knew they'd spend the rest of their lives wishing they could undo that night. But life doesn't give you do-overs for cruelty. It gives you consequences. Their fall didn't happen overnight. It happened slow, one humiliation at a time. The story kept spreading. Every news channel, every website, every social feed. Family abandons father on Christmas Eve. He wins $5 million the next day. People couldn't stop talking about it. My son's name wasn't mentioned at first, but the internet doesn't take long to find what it wants. Within a week, his full name, address, and photos from his social media were everywhere. His coworkers saw it, his boss saw it, his clients saw it. Everyone knew. He stopped going to work completely after that. The company released a statement saying they didn't support his behavior. They didn't fire him officially. They just stopped giving him shifts until he quit on his own. His wife tried to do damage control online. She wrote long posts about how the media twisted the story and how they didn't mean harm. But no one believed her. People replied with screenshots of my interview. They pointed out the dates, the photos, the police record showing that she and my son had dropped me off at the shelter. The more she defended herself, the worse it got. Eventually, she deleted every account they had, but the screenshots never disappeared. The internet never forgets. Then came the neighbors. They stopped waving. Some crossed the street when they saw them. Their kids stopped playing with my grandkids. Everyone knew them as that family. The shame didn't fade. It grew louder every time they stepped outside. Even the local paper ran a headline calling it a lesson in karma. My son couldn't handle it. He started drinking. His wife left to stay with her parents for a while. The house that was once full of laughter turned into silence. Bills piled up. With no job and no savings, they started selling things: furniture, jewelry, the second car. Each week, something else disappeared from that house. I knew because reporters kept sending me updates. They asked if I wanted to comment. I never did. There was nothing left to say. Every action they took was just another consequence of what they'd done. Eventually, the house went up for sale. The same house they threw me out of. The one I built with my hands, brick by brick. They tried to hide it by saying they were downsizing. But everyone knew the truth. No one wanted to buy it either. People said it felt bad. They said it was cursed. Maybe it was. Maybe the curse wasn't the house. Maybe it was the greed that lived inside it. By spring, they were living in a small apartment across town. No more big dinners, no more guests. My son picked up part-time work at a hardware store. His wife got a job cleaning offices. It wasn't the money that broke them. It was the loss of respect. People stopped trusting them. Even their own relatives avoided them. They couldn't erase what they'd done because it was everywhere. Every Christmas, their names popped back up in news reruns. Every year, the same reminder. I didn't visit them. I didn't send messages. I didn't have to. The world had done everything for me. There's a strange kind of justice that comes without words, when the truth becomes too heavy for lies to carry. They had laughed when they left me in that parking lot, thinking I'd fade away quietly. Instead, they became the ones people whispered about. One reporter told me they were trying to move on, maybe even leave town. But I knew better. You can't outrun guilt. You can change your address, but not your name. Wherever they went, the story would follow. They didn't lose money. They lost dignity. They didn't lose comfort. They lost peace. And every time they saw another story about me helping shelters, donating food, building homes for people with nowhere to go, they had to live with the truth that the man they left behind rose higher than they ever did. Their punishment wasn't poverty. It was watching me rebuild the life they destroyed. When the noise finally faded, peace came quietly. No cameras, no interviews, no reporters, just quiet mornings and long walks by the coast. I bought a small house overlooking the water. Nothing fancy, just clean and warm. The kind of place where silence feels safe instead of lonely. The air smelled like salt. The waves hit the rocks steady and slow, and every morning I'd sit on the porch with coffee, thinking about how life turned out. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned away long before the money came. What was left was something stronger. Clarity. I learned that peace doesn't come from winning. It comes from letting go. I didn't buy cars or jewelry. I didn't chase headlines or show off. I spent my money on things that mattered. The first thing I did was go back to the shelter. I didn't tell them who I was at first. I just walked in, sat down, and listened. Some of the same people were still there. Men who'd been forgotten by their families, women still fighting to survive. I knew their pain. I had lived it. When they realized who I was, some cried, some smiled, some just shook my hand. I made sure they all got new beds, warm meals, and clean clothes. I paid for the shelter's heating for the whole winter. That place gave me a roof when no one else would, and I wanted it to stand forever. After that, I started a small fund for seniors who had nowhere to go. Quietly. No big announcements, no cameras, no speeches. I just made sure no one would ever have to feel the cold the way I did that Christmas Eve. I helped build ramps for wheelchairs, fixed roofs, and paid hospital bills for strangers. It didn't make me a hero. It just made me human again. Helping others gave me back the piece of myself my family tried to take. Sometimes I'd see my name pop up on the news again. Small stories about donations, good deeds. My family must have seen them too. Maybe they watched from that tiny apartment they ended up in. Maybe they turned off the TV when my face appeared. I didn't care. I didn't need revenge anymore. They had already been punished by their own actions. I forgave them quietly, not because they asked, but because I needed to move on. Holding hate keeps you stuck in the same place as the people who hurt you. Letting go is what sets you free. I never called them again. Never visited. I didn't need to see regret in their eyes to know it was there. Regret doesn't hide well. It shows up in the silence that follows a cruel act. I knew they'd think about me every Christmas. I knew they'd remember that night and what they lost because of it. That was enough. Now, when December comes, I hang a single wreath on my door. I cook a small dinner for myself, simple food, nothing fancy. I sit by the fire and watch the lights flicker against the wall. And I smile, not because I'm rich, but because I survived. I made it through the kind of pain that could have destroyed me, and I came out stronger than ever. Every year, I send a large donation to shelters across the state. But I never sign it with my family's name. I sign it with mine. The name they tried to forget. The name the world will now always remember. Final thought. They left me in the cold on Christmas Eve, thinking I'd disappear. The next morning, they saw my face on every TV in America, not as a burden, but as the man who made fate his ally. They threw me away like I was nothing. Life proved I was everything they weren't.